Hey everyone, I'm Melissa from Knitting the Stash, and this is episode 68 in the series. I'm calling this one Kinky Weaving and the Kitchen Sink, and I hope that will become clear soon enough. I'm coming to you from Urbana, Illinois, where I'm a professor there at the university, and I've told you guys before I teach science fiction and speculative fiction and science-y stuff in the English department, and that is really fun. Luckily for me, the semester is very much over. I have a little grading left to do, but that's one of the reasons the cast is 3 weeks instead of 2 weeks. I wanted to wait until the end of the semester so I was just free to just do my own thing and feel like a little bit of relaxation. Plus we had Spencer's birthday last weekend, so it's been a little bit wild. For those of you who are coming back, welcome back. It's always lovely to see you and spend some time with you. And for those of you who are new, this is a podcast largely about knitting and garment modification and design and all that kind of good stuff. A little bit of spinning thrown in there every once in a while. And usually I tell you what I'm wearing, if I'm wearing anything at all that is knitted. This is, I call this my red pearl. And for those of you who have seen the cast before, this is, I'm trying to show you the lace pattern on the front. This is a very, very heavily modified dark pearl by Carol Feller. I basically just used the shell for the kind of outside of it. And then I used an elfin lace stitch pattern to create a front panel that would make this asymmetrical sweater symmetrical. Anyway, I'll put a note down here on which cast's episode I talk about this sweater if you're interested in the knitting of it. But it's very warm because it's an alpaca blend. It's Bahramu's tightest yarn, I think. And so it's super warm, super light and airy, but like so warm. And I love the sweater. And right now we're in the teens outside, so it's good to have this thing on. What else do I tell you at the beginning? Maybe that's all I tell you at the beginning. I don't know. We have a cowl going on, a knit along for Knits in Translation, and that is going to go through, I think, January, February, and then we're going to start up a new cowl for Distitch, which I will talk about on this episode. So if you're interested in getting in on that Knits in Translation cowl, and you don't have anything on your needles at the moment, jump on over to the Ravelry group, find some pattern in a language other than your own, and start knitting, and you can get in on the cowl, which will end sometime in, I think we'll say February. Okay, so a couple months left if you want to get in on it. I'm working on a Norwegian sweater that many of you know about, the Gorilla in the Room, from last episode. And I just wanted to tell you guys, it took me 2 weeks, but I reknit the whole thing. So this is the Gorilla in the Room fixed. And I will tell you, if you want to see the first version, go back to episode 67, Gorilla in the Room, and hear about the sad, sad story of the sweater. But I am happy to say this is the new version, and I think we can all agree this is awesome. I will say that in fixing up this sweater, I thought I was just going to have to fix up this part, but then I got to looking at the top part and I realized that it wasn't centered. So I don't know if you can see this detail, but I usually don't just jump right into knitting like this, but I felt like you guys deserve to see the gorilla. So you see these details here, these cables that are kind of centered right around the front neck hole. Well, when I first knit it, everything was shifted over just enough that you could see it, and it was really visually like jarring and frustrating. So I just reknit the whole damn thing. So it is waiting for sleeves, and it is waiting for the neck / collar thing. And right now I'm doing a test knit for Albina of LB Hand Knit. So this guy is going to wait for probably a couple weeks until I finish the other sweater, and I'll come back to it and reknit the sleeves. Oh, I frogged everything on Thanksgiving. We went home, and that first night of Thanksgiving we went to my dad's house to play cards, and I just sat there, I pulled everything out of my bag, everybody was talking. It was like the perfect community moment to just frog the whole thing, because I was sitting with a bunch of non-knitters, and they kind of were watching, and they were a little bit like, every once in a while you'd hear a kind of like, oh, like, oh, as I pulled apart, you know, something. But yeah, I just frogged the sleeves and sat there and pulled apart the middle part that I still have, and that hopefully will still be a pillow that I'll show you soon. And then that's it. I just reknit the color work pretty much all over Thanksgiving and then reknit the top when I got back. So it only took a couple weeks, and I'm very, very, very happy with the result as opposed to the crazy creation that it was before. I think these colors, this color background foreground is much more subtle and nice to look at, whereas before I had the white and the purple reversed, and it didn't quite work as well. So that's my gorilla in the room. That's your quick segment on the update and what's going on. What else do I have on the cast today? I have a finished object, which is the Joker and the Thief Shawl, which is also for the Knits in Translation knit along. And I have a couple of notes of things that I found and things that are interesting, including I'm in a master grading class that I'll talk about for pattern grading, like sizing, how to make it bigger, how to make patterns bigger and smaller. And then I want to talk about Distitch, which is a new technique from Assia Brill, and her book has just come out, and we need to talk about Distitch because it's really pretty interesting. I have a segment with Spencer, as I mentioned, and let's see, the giveaway. I've got 2 giveaways to announce for 3 winners. So at the end of the cast, I will announce all of those winners. So why don't we get rolling with Spencer first, and then we'll come back and talk about some finished objects and some other kitchen sink finds around the knitting world. Okay. So we have Spencer on the cast today, and this is at a special request because you all like to have him come on the cast.
I found it very hard to believe, but I'm flattered.
You should read the comments. People are like, bring him back, bring him back. I think they think you're kind of humorous.
I don't know much about knitting.
And I think that's what they love.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, in a nice way.
Okay. All right.
So, and one of the reasons that the cast is 3 weeks instead of 2 weeks is because this man had a birthday. And
49.
So didn't
you took a week off casting?
I didn't want to, you know, mix up the cast with the birthday.
Okay,
so,
it was
you know,
good.
There was cake making and there was other stuff going on. So it was busy birthday. But I was excited to have him back on because I've been wanting to do this for a couple weeks since the last episode he was on, when he talked about colorways. And kind of got people a little fired up about colorways.
Have you guys changed that term yet?
No, but people did have a long discussion about it in the comments on that episode, so it was good.
All right.
But I want to put a call out there to all the indie dyers who are watching. If you want to make a Spencer colorway,
oh no,
I would love to see it, and I think he would love it if he had his own colorway.
I'd be into that.
So if you're interested, put a note here, send us an email, the Spencer colorway, because he needs one. After all he said, after all the crap he said
about... Was I talking shit? I don't even remember that.
You were talking shit about colorways just a little bit.
Gosh.
So...
That was wrong of me. I'm here to formally apologize.
And now he needs his own colorway.
For talking shit about colorways. Alright, so on my birthday, I wanted to do some stuff around the farm just because I kind of put it off. Because I'm, whatever.
It was weird. He's like, on my birthday, I'm going to go outside and do a lot of manual labor.
Yeah, so anyway, so I was working on the chicken coop. I was adding like some nesting boxes and stuff. And I was wearing my new hat, which Melissa knitted. And I got it covered in sawdust and chicken shit and all kinds of stuff.
God.
But it just shook out. It's a nice hat.
Yeah.
I've got it sort of tucked a little bit.
You don't need to have it tucked in.
I just have a little tucked.
Just get a picture knitting.
And I think it's cabled.
It is.
I should probably wear it with my cabled sweater.
Yeah, that would be even better.
But I don't know if you can do that. Is that like a plaid with a plaid?
No, it's like a cable with a cable.
You can do that?
Okay. This is actually the traveling hat. It's called the traveling hat, and it was designed by Kefren Pritchett for the Shorn yarn. So this is the first you're seeing of Shorn.
Oh, this is like the stuff.
This is Shorn from 2019, the 2019 clip. Yeah, see, there you go. I'm just using his head. Oh, man.
All right.
So, she designed a beautiful cabled hat and
really sweet.
fingerless mitts. So I was test knitting her pattern, which
and I think it just ended up being bigger than you thought or something.
No, I made the big size because I was kind of hoping that it would fit.
I love it. It's great.
Yeah. So the hat has 2 sizes, and once the hats and mitts are all finished being test knit, then, and I get the yarn all labeled, which is sitting over there in the closet, in a nice bin. Shorn will be launched by the end of January. So if you're interested in this hat or just getting some of the yarn for us, it would be perfect for a sweater because it's so plump
hands
and
off the
squishy.
merchandise. I don't know if she actually gave it to me or if I'm just wearing it, but I liked it.
It was partly a birthday present.
All right, so we're sitting around the other night and Melissa was watching this tutorial video about knitting, and I think these are pretty cool. You know, it's like you don't know how to do short rows, so it's like, you know, knit down at the end,
I'm like, I know how to do short
drop a slip a stitch, turn, wrap and turn, come on back the other way.
Okay, he's getting
do that a few times, you know.
Yeah.
This was way more complicated than that. This was like, you know, this lady's doing the tutorial and she's real chill about it. She's like, so take 3 stitches off your needles, hold those to the back, then come in through the back and the front, but the back loop you'll have to do a double twist, whatever, and it was so freaking complicated. I couldn't handle it. Then she's also doing this stuff, this new stuff called the Distitch, and she tried to describe that to me.
Which I'm talking about on this cast, so you'll see.
What the heck is up with this stuff? I feel like y'all took knitting and just went like way, way deep.
Well, there's some cool new stuff out there. There's some cool stuff out there. And plus, at the same time, I think the week before that, I was Kitchenering a piece of a sweater back together.
Oh, there was that whole thing.
And I was trying to show him how you do it with a needle. You know, like grafting 2 live sets of live stitches together.
She was basically knitting with a needle.
Yeah, so you knit with your sewing needle, which is what Kitchenering is. But if you have really woolly yarn, you don't have to have the loops on the needles. You can just let them sit there, and then you can graft if you kind of know what you're doing. And so he was cool, like, how does it work?
It was crazy. I guess what I realized is that as a noob, I realized that when I'm knitting, I don't actually know what I'm doing. You know, it's like it creates this fabric. Which is odd for him because he's a very spatial person. Like, I can't handle 3 dimensions and I get lost. I kind of figured that you were making knots every time.
That's what he kept calling it.
You know, like you create a knot and then you create another knot.
But it's not. It's all open.
But it's like, not a knot.
So I showed him some images because I thought this might help. This is from Flawless Knit Repair. From Rita Crockett. And this is a book that I got from one of my guildmates a long while back. It's just kind of like a typewritten little like hand-bound book. But it's great because on the cover it has images of like what stitches look like when you're, you know, fixing things. And
cool.
So I used it to show him what grafting looks like that you're actually doing this kind of thing to the stitches to bring them together.
It looked a lot like weaving.
Weaving?
Yeah, I mean, you created a warp and then you were hooking up the weft.
I guess, kind of.
That's what it looked like. It's like weaving with a lot of kinks to it.
Okay, we'll go with that. Knitting is weaving with a lot of kinks.
Kinky weaving.
Knitting is kinky
All right, can I show my kinky weaving?
Yeah, sure.
All right, so I might have said maybe a year ago in this cast that I was knitting a sweater. I did that for like a month, and then maybe for 10 or 11 months I didn't do that at all. But Melissa gave me my knitting bag that's on loan. I think the bag's on loan.
Yeah.
She gave this back to me, and I found this really good stuff in here. Like, check this out. There's a plan, some kind of, I don't know if you can see that, but...
There it is.
She also hooked me up with some of this like sweater math kind of stuff. You know, like all the numbers and everything.
You're about as bad as Zach with his backpack.
All right.
Like the homework papers.
All right, here's the sweater. I'm going to show you guys where we're at. I think it's coming along. Check it. Can you see that?
It's actually up to your...
Check it out. I'm supposed to go
chest.
20 inches to get to my armpits. So I guess right here is like 20 inches, and I'm at 15.
Yeah, you put your arm up and I'll hold it.
All right, so I need like 5 more inches.
Yeah.
What I'm doing in my pattern, here's my pattern, so-called pattern, is knitting, and then occasionally throwing in a purl row. Just to give like a little, you know, like a little architectural, contrastual, sexy weaving.
Kinky weaving, sexy weaving.
Kinky weaving.
Either way.
Anyway, it's coming along, but not really.
This fabric's really nice.
I worked on it last night just because I was going to talk about it today. I also found that my needles had been taken.
Look, man, if you leave a project for 11 months, someone needs those needles.
I come back to it, and the needles were like, there was just one loop, like all connected. Anyway.
I put a little fastener in there to save his work, you know, and then I went back to what my notes were, and I had written down very clearly size 6
needle.
So
yeah, so we need to change size. Anyway, it's coming along. I'll probably finish it tomorrow.
Yeah, I would say so.
You know, something like that.
Right, after you finish with the chicken coop and all the other.
Yeah, paint the bus.
Yeah. Oh, painting the bus. Is that actually happening?
No, not until it gets warmer.
Yeah. There you go.
Anyway, the sweater's coming along. I'm making a video about it.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that part.
But it's
delayed.
It's a slower. It's like a part of the slow foods movement. I'm a slow knitter. Slow knitting movement. There's probably that.
Yeah, there's totally slow knitting.
There's already that.
Yeah. But it's nice of you to bring it up.
All right. Any questions for me?
If you guys have questions for Spencer,
do you have any?
Leave them in the comments.
Oh no!
Because that next time he comes on, he'll have to answer for himself.
All right, I will read the comments this time. Thanks for having me on the cast.
Yeah, nice.
You guys do amazing stuff.
Thank you. And if you want to work on Spencer's colorway,
oh man,
do it up. Let us know, because he needs one.
Oh god.
What would be your color? I guess that's my question.
Just gray.
Gray.
Straight up.
Just gray.
Dirty gray.
Dirty gray.
Yeah.
I think his colorway should be called Kinky Weaving.
I still don't know what a colorway is, but you can tell me over lunch.
Okay. We'll work on it.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye. I hope you enjoyed that segment with Spencer. It's always fun to have him on the cast. And if you see me looking out the window, it's because all of our chickens are running back and forth across the fence, and I'm just kind of making sure they're okay. They look like they were scattered for a minute there, but they seem to be all right. So let me take a minute and tell you about the Joker and the Thief Shawl, which is Melanie Berg, Maryland, on Instagram and Ravelry and a bunch of other places. It's a design by her, and it comes out of this book, which is shawls, and it's her first shawl book. She has a second shawl book out now. And this is a knits in translation because this book is in German and English. So while the CAL is really for patterns in a language other than your own and trying to translate them and kind of figure them out, I think this counts because you're actually learning a lot about German knitting at the same time as you're knitting in the English, because as you can see, it has two columns, so one's in German and one's in English, and you can kind of follow along with both and learn about some of the knitting terminology and all that kind of good stuff that we've been talking about for the past couple of months on the cast, I guess. So as I said, this is the Joker and the Thief Shawl, and this is her version of it, which I think is quite beautiful. I knit mine out of Old Crow Art Yarns, Gradient Colorway, the Devil's Macaroon, I believe it's called, and the School of Sweet Georgia yarns in this Evening Colorway, which is one of their new colorways for the kind of autumn winter season. And this shawl is a beautifully oversized shawl, like way bigger than I usually would wear. I'm trying to I would need to back way up for you to see it, but I think you can kind of get a glimpse of it here. And it is all of the different gradient colorways mixed in, and then this interesting stitch, which I think you can see here, which really opens up the work. It's almost like it's a beautiful little lace yarn over kind of stitch, which is really fascinating. It's fascinating to learn and to knit, and it breaks up all of the knitting. So over here in the color work, these darker lines have that little lacework pattern, and then over here, the color work, the colors have the little lace pattern. So it's a huge shawl, massive in fact, and I think if you were to put it on, it would pretty much act like a coat. I mean, it's just squishy and warm, and the Old Crow Art Yarns gradient pack and the Sweet Georgia yarn just really meshed well together. And I thought the nice thing about the Sweet Georgia yarn, which is, again, it's this darker background color, you can kind of see the nuance of that color. It has not just blues, but greens and a little bit of teal and turquoise in it. So when I paired it up with the Devil's Macaroon set, it just kind of picked up all those different colors, and it was kind of perfect. I also have mixed in here some Madeline Tosh, which is this guy, and that's a colorway that I used for another scarfy shawl for Jennifer Wood of Woodhouse Knits. And I have some Eden Cottage Craft yarn, which is this guy, which I used for some socks a while back. So it was a little bit of a grab-all catch-all, but I love the way these colors came together, and I think it's a beautiful version of the shawl. And the shawl starts out, as do most asymmetrical triangular shawls, which is my favorite, down at the tiny tip, and then you're increasing, adding in your color, increasing until you get to your end over here, which is incredibly long. And that's where you can really start to see some of that synergy between the Sweet Georgia yarn and the Old Crow art yarn, I think. So I love this thing. It is beautiful and squishy, and my dear friend Jean tried it on while I was working on it over Thanksgiving, and she kind of fell in love with it. And she doesn't really like wearing itchy stuff, but this is not itchy. This is like, you could just wear this like right up against your face and you would never even notice it. It's just so soft. So this is going to Jean, and Jean doesn't know that yet, but she just had a birthday in November and Christmas is coming, and it just seems like the perfect time to send something like this off to her. I think she'll enjoy it. She likes color, and she likes like things with a lot of style to them. So I think this will be a nice piece for her to have in her closet. So Jean, it's on its way to you if you happen to be watching the cast. And if you're not watching the cast, then it'll be a lovely surprise. So this is Joker and the Thief by Melanie Berg, and I've done a terrible job of putting it back on the mannequin, so I'm gonna try again. Let's see. Let's try it this way. That seems a little bit better. There you go. So over the last couple of weeks, I've been involved in a couple of different, one's a class and one is a review of a book, and I really wanted to share them with you because they're, both of them I think are important for folks in the knitting community who are interested in thinking about new techniques and new directions in knitting. The first is, there is a master class on grading patterns that's going on right now. There are about 57 or 60 of us in the class, maybe 55. A small group of us, and this is a master class on grading that's being hosted by Joelle Kelly of the Tech Editor Hub, and you can join the Tech Editor Hub on Facebook, the group, if you're interested in learning more about tech editing and seeing how tech editors work, and kind of getting, if you're interested in actually, like, if you're kind of serious about how tech editing is done in the industry. It's a great group. And so Joelle Kelly is hosting this master grading class, which includes instructors like Julie Robinson, Melissa Metzbauer, and Sarah Walworth. And the class is going on for a few weeks. Right now we've just finished Sarah Walworth's segment of the class, and the class includes video, it includes PDFs, it's live office hours, just tons of wonderful support. And a lot of it is about Excel and spreadsheets for grading and how patterns get graded and what tech editors do when they're grading patterns. So I thought it was kind of interesting to take a break here and think a little bit about the knitting industry, because I know when I started knitting and I would pick up a pattern, I had very little idea that there are actually different segments of the industry that are working on this pattern, most likely. Not all patterns. Some indie patterns, the designer will do everything. I know that when I do patterns, I've done everything so far, but I can see the value in having a team who's like specifically working on X or Y or Z. So if a designer has come up with a wonderful design for a sweater, they've sketched it out, maybe they've knit a sample, then they would send it off potentially to a grader. And a grader is not someone who's marking their papers, A, B, C, and D, but they're actually grading the pattern from sizes, let's say, 30-inch bust all the way up to 64-inch bust if it's a sweater. And I've done some grading myself on sweater patterns, and it is not an easy thing to do, and you have to be kind of into the math, and the only way I've ever done it is without an Excel spreadsheet, and that is kind of painful. So in this class, I'm learning how to use Excel spreadsheets, and there are actually tons of resources that are free online if you're interested in checking it out and kind of just learning a little bit about it. One of them is from Marnie McLean. She has tons of info up on her site about how she grades patterns and how she uses Excel and how to set up a basic spreadsheet. And luckily for me, Catherine Pritchett, who designed the 2 patterns for the new Shorn yarn, is also in the class, and she's offered to help me set up my spreadsheet. So I'm super grateful to this community. It's really been fun and great to meet people and to have people in the class that I know, and to kind of start working on this idea of grading. So there are tons of resources out there to get you started, but this class is focused largely on what do you need to think about when you're grading a pattern? And you're thinking about ease, you're thinking about body measurements, you're thinking about how to keep the design similar from the size that you have, the sample that you have, all the way up through these different graded versions of it. So there's just so much to learn. And I've also been thinking a lot about size inclusivity because of the ways that the knitting community have been talking about it. And I've seen it discussed on social media and on people's blogs and in other casts. And so I'm trying to educate myself as much as possible about how to think about bodies and the distinctions between bodies and what happens when bodies are different sizes and how that affects knitting and patterns and things like that. So I've actually picked out and looked for a few books that are more size inclusive and patterns that are more size inclusive to kind of pick their brain a little bit to see how they work and what it is that they're changing and adapting when they go from the 30 inches sizes to the 40 inch sizes to the 50s to the 60s, and to get a sense of like what happens to a design when you grade it bigger or smaller. So I think it's a cool conversation. This has been a great class so far, and I'm really looking forward to the next couple of modules. And I thought it was something that would be interesting to talk about on here, just because, you know, when a pattern goes to a grader, it's kind of out of the designer's hands until it comes back to them, you know, graded, like fully fleshed out. And there are also tech editors involved, and there are test knitters and sample knitters. So when you see your favorite designer, you know, kind of cranking out patterns month after month or every couple weeks or whatever it is, they're not usually in it alone. They have a kind of small army of people probably helping them. And some of them, as I talked with Sarah about on her live office hours, like some people, some designers will credit their tech editors and their test knitters and make sure that it's known that this is kind of a community effort. And I like that idea. I think it's really important to recognize that it might look like a designer X is kind of just cranking out these patterns, but in reality, they're not working alone. And so it's cool to think about the greater community that's involved in the creation of all this, these new patterns and all this content on Ravelry and things like that. So yeah, interesting. One bit of interesting stuff from the last couple of weeks. So if the master grading class has kept me busy on the one hand, the other thing that's kind of kept my attention over the last couple of weeks is a new book that's just come out from Assia Brill, and that is this. It is called Distitch, and I saw it on Amazon because I tend to troll Amazon a little bit and like I want to see what new knitting books are out there, what's coming out, you know, what's in pre-order right now, like what's new, what's coming, because I'm always excited to kind of check out the latest thing and see if my library has it or order it myself. So when I saw this book, I wanted to get in touch with Assia because it seemed to me from the description that this was actually kind of a new technique in knitting. And I know that Elizabeth Zimmerman has said there's no, you know, there's nothing new under the sun, and she's talked about unventing things rather than inventing them. And I think Assia would agree that there are some echoes of this technique in other techniques that a lot of us know. But in knitting up a Distitch swatch, I feel like this is actually a pretty new technique, and I'm curious to know what you guys think of it. And I really do want to start a Distitch knit along in the new year if anybody's interested in kind of following along, learning this new stitch and making a project. So I will start that up in the Ravelry group sooner than later, just so people can get excited about it and get into it. But let's go back to the beginning. So what is Distitch? And you can see from the cover that it involves having double loops on your needles. And I think you can also see from the cover that it creates stitches that are kind of more peaked and more distinct. They have a kind of more distinct edge to them than traditional knitting. So Distitch is, it felt to me like when I was doing the swatching, it felt to me a little bit like what you might do with brioche or with slip stitch or with double knitting or twice knitting. And Assia talks about this in her her opening in the history of Distitch. She mentions a few other techniques that are kind of like maybe have elements of Distitch to them, or that were inspiring to her when she was working on Distitch. Things like the twice knit method, the bugle cord, embroidery stitch, and some twisted stitches. They were things that she found when she went looking to see if anyone else was doing Distitch. And really she couldn't find anyone who was. And when I compare it to like a brioche or a slip stitch, That's more of how it feels to my hands when I'm working the needles as opposed to like what it's actually doing, because you can do distitch, you can work distitch in brioche, in colorwork, in slip stitch knitting, with short rows. You can do all your normal techniques with distitch. So distitch is really just a different way of handling the yarn on the needles. And you're actually knitting not through just the upper loop. We were talking about this with Spencer. You're not just knitting through a single loop. You're actually knitting through two loops, the loop on the needle and the loop below at the same time. Like it's hard to explain. You really do need the book, and you need to watch her tutorial videos that are embedded in the book. She has all these QR codes throughout the book that if you click on them with your camera on your phone, they just pop up the video and you can watch the tutorial. But she also has some really beautiful technique pages where everything is explained in photographs as well. So distitch is a totally new, interesting technique, and I worked up a swatch, which I put under everything else over here. Hang on a second. Crinkle, crinkle. And this may be the best way to kind of show it to you. So I worked up a swatch with Distitch, and I used her combo cast on to cast on the bottom. It makes this beautiful cast on. And then I worked a little bit of Distitch ribbing, just so you can see it there. And you can see that you can't quite see it as much in this swatch because there's not a comparison swatch. I'll show you a comparison in a minute. But it's a little wider, it's a little fatter than other conventional knitting. And then I just knit just in stockinette, in Distitch, and I'm kind of wondering if the camera will be able to do this. But each stitch has two threads, two pieces of yarn embedded in it. Each leg of that stitch has two pieces of yarn, and I think you can see that. So that's what you see on the front. And on the back, I think that's where you can really actually see it in stockinette. Look how dense this fabric is. So this is the purl side of a basic stockinette work, and you see how dense that is? That is like some of the densest fabric I've ever created, and it's because everything is kind of doubled up. So there are a few things that Assia talks about with Distitch and what it would be useful for, and she talks mostly about warmth, strength, decoration, and variety. And that's because the warmth and the strength is because it's not double knitting because it's not different on the back and the front, but it is doubled knitting because you're working these stitches kind of a second time with an extra piece of yarn. So this fabric is like almost double thick and incredibly sturdy, and it still has a little give to it, but not too much. Not a little give this way, but not as much this way. And it would be great for like the heels of socks, or just the basic stockinette version would be, because it's just so thick and so sturdy. But that's not the only thing that Distitch is good for. The stitches themselves are really, really distinct. So this is conventional knitting, and here's brioche Distitch. And you can kind of see that each stitch has a really distinctive line around it. I think the colorwork is probably the best example. Let me find you a little bit here. So this is some of the colorwork, and I think you can see that the stitches are just more distinctive than they might be if it were not in a Distitch pattern. They have a little sharper of an edge, they're a little elongated, and for all of those reasons they show up colorwork really beautifully. Okay, so what is Distitch good for? It's good for places where you need warmth and strength, places like the heel of a sock, for example. But it also can be used for things like brioche, for colorwork, for double knitting, anywhere you want to kind of produce an interesting contrast and create stitches that are more well-defined. And really, I mean, one of the cool things about this technique is that you could be knitting conventionally, say on a sweater or a hat or a scarf or something, and then you're like, I want to do a Distitch section. It's like, I want to do the colorwork section in Distitch because I really want that sharp pop of the colorwork stitches. Well, you can convert regular knitting into Distitch knitting, do your Distitch, and then convert yourself back out of Distitch knitting. That's one of the coolest things that I found in this book, that you can just insert it really pretty casually wherever you want, or wherever you think you need it. So like I said, heel of a sock, no problem. You just convert to Distitches, which are those doubled up stitches on your needles. You work your heel of your sock, and then you could convert out back to regular stitches and work the rest of your sock. So it's a really cool technique. It's kind of like I think of it as like a commando technique in that respect. Like you can put it in just where you want it. So I'm like, I've only had a couple weeks with this book, and like I said, I read it, I've watched her video tutorials, and then I started knitting and figured out how it works. But now I want to go on and do some of the projects in this book. So she has some pretty simple, well, they're actually graded into 3. Some are intermediate, some are easy, and some are hard. But she has a bunch of projects in here, from hats to scarves, little headbands, some they're like little coasters kind of thing, just to get you going with Distitch. And I kind of want to try like brioche with Distitch and colorwork with Distitch, and I want to see what all these edgings look like, because she talks a lot about this Distitch edge scarf, for example. The edgings on here are like some of the cleanest edgings I can remember seeing in knitting. So I want to play around with that and see what it is that is going on. So like, for example, here's the edging on this scarf, which is a really beautiful, produces a really beautiful effect. I would love to host a knit along for anyone else who wants to try Distitch of any kind. If you want to pick up the book, you want to knit just a simple hat or a coaster, or even just a swatch, just to try it out. I would love to host this kind of as a knit along. And this isn't something that Assia and I have talked about. It's just something that I want to do because I want to kind of create a little community around folks who are interested in learning this technique and thinking about knitting in different ways. But I think anyone can do this. Even if you're a relatively new knitter, you could learn Distitch. And it would be pretty interesting at that stage to learn it, because it's such a contrast to regular old knitting, and it produces such different fabric. So happy to host a knit along starting in the new year. I'll put some info up on Ravelry now, just in case people are interested in getting involved. And I'm also going to post, I have an interview coming up with Assia on the blog, and I'm going to post more of a review over there, so that if you're interested in kind of getting some more information about the book and about her, it will be over on the blog at knittingthestash.wordpress.com. So now we're down to just some announcement type things. I have the giveaway winners, and I also have a quick shout out to Deanna of Haxton Knits. It's a new podcast out. Deanna's been hosting for the past little bit, and her podcast is fun because she's also a brewer. So she is an indie brewer and for beer, and she also knits, and it turns out she's a master knitter. She's completed the master knitter training class, and she talks about it on episode 3. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about master knitting status and what it's like to go through the course, Deanna of Haxton Knits is covering all that over on episode 3 of her Haxton Knits podcast. So check it out. Now for the giveaway. Let's see here. We have 3 winners because I was hosting 2 different giveaways with 3 different prizes. So let's jump into the winners here. And I've already done all the random number generating. So the first prize is for some of Kathy's beautiful yarn that we did the yarn launch for. This is Heirloom, the Leicester Long Wool Corriedale blend that I did the yarn launch for maybe a month ago now, and it was for this skein of yarn. And the winner of that is Margarita Deverson. So I'm going to put your name on the screen here in case I've mispronounced it. Margarita Deverson has won this skein of yarn from Seven Sisters Farm, the heirloom yarn. And if you're interested in picking up some heirloom yarn, which is a farm to skein yarn made by Kathy, who's a lovely shepherdess local to me, I think she still has skeins available. So get in touch with me, or I'll put her email address on the screen too if you're interested in ordering a little piece of her farm. That way you can get it. Okay, so congratulations to Margarita. And I will get this in the post to you as soon as I get your address. The other giveaway we had going on was from Blackberry Ridge Woolen Mill, which is a woolen mill up in Wisconsin, and I've been talking to Ann up there for quite some time. She's selling her mill and is looking for a new owner, so if you're interested in getting in the milling business, get in touch with Ann. Her beautiful yarn is woolen spun yarn, and we talked a little bit about woolen spun yarn on just a previous episode. So these two skeins were one of the prizes, and this is the colorway Boundary Waters. Beautiful woolen fingering weight yarn from Blackberry Ridge Woolen Mill. So that is one prize, and the other prize is these two sets, or these two skeins, and this is the color Blackberry, which is quite appropriate, I think. Beautiful deep reds and purples, and these woolen yarns, as we talked about last time, are just so springy and light and warm, like so warm. So those were our two prizes, thanks to Ann and Blackberry Ridge Woolen Mill, and our winners are Farm to Needle. She's inspired by fiber on Instagram, and you've won one of the prizes, so get in touch with me with your postal address so I can send those off to you. The other winner is Julie, who is Julieann 2 on Ravelry. Julie, congratulations. And congratulations to Farm to Needle, and congratulations to Margarita. You guys have all won those beautiful prizes, and I will send them out to you shortly. Get in touch with me. I'm so happy to host all these giveaways, and I want to thank all of our giveaway sponsors, Blackberry Ridge Woolen Mill and Kathy of Seven Sisters Farm, for these last couple of giveaways. Thank you so much. And I think that's it. Might be a little bit of a long episode, but thanks for sticking with me. It was lovely to hang out with you guys today, and I will see you again in a couple of weeks. Take care.